Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I am going to be talking about railroading and the question of if you are railroading if you do XYZ. So this topic came up on the nerdarchy.com, which actually came up on YouTube, Nerdarchy's YouTube channel. And the question was, are you railroading if you create a story for your Dungeons and Dragons game? So a good example of this would be you're going toward a Dungeons and Dragons game on Friday, and you have your group, and you write, okay, they're going to come into a village, and when they come into a village, they're going to meet a halfling, and the halfling is going to tell them, hey, there's a bugbear in the hills, and that bugbear last week killed a group of adventurers right here, like 3 low-level adventurers, and it took all their treasure and dragged it back to its lair, right? And then you write out the adventure for the bugbear. You write out the encounter for the bugbear. You check down the what page the bugbear is on. You write out its treasure that it stole from the adventurers, and then that's it, and you're done. Okay, and that's your adventure, right? And the question is that a railroad? And the answer is absolutely, without a doubt, yes, right? So it is absolutely a railroad, and it should absolutely not be done. So the days of railroad adventures are well over, right? There has been an understanding of collaborative storytelling and branching storytelling within Dungeons and Dragons since at least 3rd edition, right? And they've done multiple adventures, published adventures that have branching, right? So that have, so the way that you would branch that story is one, you always want to make it so that you could walk into a game with as little as possible and still run that game. A game master actually should be able to make up a story on the fly, right? So the exact same adventure would be, they go into the town, they meet the halfling, he tells them the story of the bugbear, and at that point you could write out the material for the bugbear, although, yeah, we'll get there. So let's say you write out the encounter with the bugbear, what weapons it'll have, and what treasure they'll get if they defeat the bugbear, right? But then at that point, you immediately need to give them, they can actually start on, so at that point, the players have the option to say, we're going to go stay in the tavern and just drink some mead, right? Now, the moment they go into the tavern, you should know who is in the tavern, right? So they go into the tavern, and there's a bard in the tavern, and the bard starts playing a little tune, and then walks around the room to play their tune, and then gets done. Everybody claps, everybody throws some coppers, and then later when they go to pay for their mutton, one of the characters, and then the bard leaves, right? Then one of the characters goes to actually check for their gold coins to pay for their mutton, or their silver coins, because the mutton would be that expensive, and they find, oh no, my coin purse is gone. That bard wasn't a bard, he was a rogue, right? And he cut my coin purse, and now I'm going to run over this way, right? So basically, you always have to have at least 2 or 3 adventures ready, and in addition to that, you need to have the ability to just make up on a story on the fly, right? And you need to be willing. And here's this is the key part, right? So the characters decide, hey, I'm not going to go. That bugbear is a major deal. He could have additional. I'm not going to go. There's no need to go get that guy's stuff, right? And they said, we're just going to go to the tavern and try to determine if there's anything else to do. We don't really want to do that bugbear, thing. Now, at this point, a lot of game masters would get them to the bugbear one way or another. And there's a million different game master tricks that allow you to do this, right? But the reality is, it's wrong to do, right? So, and here's the key to not railroading. You have to be willing to run a crap encounter, or even 2 or 3, or really have a complete crap session every now and then, right? And the reason why is you're better off having a terrible adventure that you did not plan, that the player characters chose, than for those characters to go through your best written story possible if they didn't choose to do it, or if they had no choice to do it. And the reason why is times have changed. In the 80s and 90s, people just didn't have the choices they could, and you could get away with this in the 80s and 90s, and people were thrilled to play Dungeons and Dragons. Well, now there's a lot of options, and serving up this type of pablum is absolutely wrong, right? So, basically what you do as a game master is you set up the pins and they knock them down, period, right? And it's really critical that you do not write a story and expect your players to go through that story and they don't have any other option, or that you fall in love with one of your stories and they don't have any option to get there. Now, I will say, I absolutely did this when I was a young game master, and I didn't know any better, but now I do, and so it's really critical that you're willing to run a real crap session over your own written awesome content. And the reason why is it tells the players your choices matter. You have agency in this game. It's not just the story I'm telling, because if you are a game master and you have a story that you are dead set to tell, and it's important that that story is told, then you need to write it down, right? And and make a short story out of it, make a novel. If you want a story told in a particular way, don't bring that story to your game table, all right? And expect it to survive. It will not survive. Like, players just are notorious for bending stories. And so you play a Dungeons & Dragons game to find out what happens, not to tell a story that you wrote. And this is really critical. Another key element here to that I would throw in for, are you railroading? And this is a huge one, okay? If you ever write a story where you have a character and they meet the player characters, and then you assume that those characters will be alive after they have met the player characters, you are railroading, okay? And this is a fundamental change from how Dungeons & Dragons stories were told in 1st and 2nd edition, because I think this happened a lot then. And also, I will say right now, I actually do think that modules are utterly useless. They are the worst. If you're running modules for your players, it's not useful. It is really not useful, because virtually all modules based on publishing, I would say that 90% of them out there are absolute railroads, right? And it's horrible. Like, it makes my skin itch. And so if you have a dark paladin and you say, okay, the characters are going to meet this dark paladin at the edge of the forest and they're going to fight him, right? And he is going to mark one of them with a special mark. And when they go away from them, they will manifest dark powers themselves. And then later, when they come across that dark paladin again, he will immediately be able to take over 1 out of 3 actions, 1 out of 3 turns. He'll be able to control that character. That's a pretty cool, it's a great storyline. It's really neat. It's interesting, right? But it's useless and it's worthless and it's railroading, and it should absolutely not be done. And the reason why is, you as a game master, when you put that dark paladin in front of those players, you cannot assume, and you should not be writing stories based on that dark paladin being alive later in the adventure. And the reason why is, if you've done that, you are assuming that the players, even if they're like, 2 or 3 times the level of the player characters can drown somebody in a river, right? Doesn't matter what level you are. You can always drown in a river. They can roll all 20s, right? And the reality is, it is a collaborative story, and the agency of players must absolutely be respected. And especially today, because there just is not you don't have the privileges we had in the 80s and 90s, where everybody was just scrambling to get into a Dungeons & Dragons game and would stay there, right? It's just really critical that we say, if you have honored our table with your presence, then your decisions are going to matter, your roles are going to matter, and every single non-player character I put in front of you is possibly going to die. And I will never write a story that assumes that any character that comes within your vicinity is going to live later, right? Now, that means that you have to completely change the structure you use to write stories. And that means you need to have non-player characters queued up. And you don't even have to do that. You could just have a random generator. You could just generate randomly, the character that I wanted to, you have to be ready to make up a story on the fly. The player character that I had this entire adventure designed around, right? He is dead now. And so I only plan for the next session. I don't write story arcs that span 6 or 7 or 8 adventures. And this was done all the time in first and second edition. And the game masters that do it now have it's horribly wrong. It is incredibly wrong. You should not be writing any stories that talk about what's going to happen 2 or 3 sessions away, even 2 sessions away, right? And now game masters have absolutely a very good excuse for doing this. And the reason why is there have been modules published within Dungeons & Dragons for decades. And the modules do this all the time. They're like, you're going to go into this tomb, and the tomb this is going to happen in this place of the tomb, and this is going to happen in this place of the tomb. And the reality is, the player characters can do something or involve something which cracks that tomb in half, or explodes the entrance, or floods it, or takes it into another realm, or any of that stuff. And so the idea of writing these long arching storylines, it is railroading. And we are at a point, especially after Dungeon World. So Dungeon World has introduced this to the tabletop role-playing game community, where we play to find out what happens. And this is absolutely the optimal way to play Dungeons & Dragons, because it embraces player agency. And I think that is the real lesson of 2017 and of 5th edition, is that the time invested by the players is actually far more valuable than the time invested by the game master. And one of the reasons why I say that is there are more of them there, right? So you as a game master, you might be investing time to get ready, but the reality is those players, there are more of them than you, right? So they literally are a factor of your time. And then in addition to that, game masters generally, right, are drawn to the game. Game masters are drawn to the game. And the reason why is game mastering is, you have the power of a god. You can make anything happen, a deity. You have the power of a deity. You can determine what the weather is. You can kill characters, kill non-player characters whenever you wish. The power there is incredible. There's virtually no limits to the power you have as a game master. And so that is attractive to many. So there is a reward in that, right? And also, when players come to the table, you're expecting their full attention, right? So with that said, they are going to determine the direction of that story, and that is absolutely the path that needs to happen. So if you're writing any story and you assume that the characters are going to meet this character here, the player characters are going to meet this non-player character here, and then three encounters later, or later in that evening, they're going to meet that character again, then you're railroading. And I will say, this is very different, and it takes a completely different perspective, and it absolutely requires that a game master be able to tell stories on the fly. But I also think it's really important that we embrace this, and we go down this road, and we make sure that this is how Dungeons & Dragons gets played, because being stuck in a railroad game is the worst. And there are a lot of people that have been jammed up and stuck into these railroad games, and they think that's what Dungeons & Dragons is. And we need to stop that, right? We need to show people that Dungeons & Dragons is actually a collaborative story. It is a collaborative story, and it's not you just walking through and experiencing the story that a game master wrote. So I guess, in summary, you're far better off running a pure crap session with the most generic monsters. You get caught by some goblins in the middle of a field, and then you go to the next field, or then you go to the edge of the forest and you encounter a bugbear there, or just really lame, terrible storytelling that the players chose is much, much better than your finely crafted story. And the reason why is player agency, and getting players to realize they have agency in a game is what makes the game exciting for them, and what turns them eventually into game masters. And dragging players through your story, no matter how awesome it is wrong, and we really need to step away from it. That's my take on railroading.